You're watching Legal Help Desk. This show is about making the law work for you by giving legal advice on topics that matter to you. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno.
And I'm Attorney Rod Nepomuceno. Tonight we'll discuss your legal rights on the subject matter of ejectment and unlawful detainer.
Our guests for tonight are Attorney Gilbert Navarro, private law practitioner, and Attorney Jose Paulo Patajo, legal officer of Cathay Land Incorporated. Good evening and thank you for being with us tonight.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening. Thank you for having us.
Attorney Paulo and Attorney Gilbert. But for brevity, Gilbert and Paulo. All right.
Okay, another very relevant topic since we're talking about basically occupation of
property,
housing lots, and even apartment units.
It's quite common. No? It's I think this cause of action is,
and it's relevant to both people renting or even people renting out their properties. So,
but there are three terms that we need to clarify: the term of ejectment, unlawful detainer, and forcible entry. Those are the three topics that we're discussing now. Those are all not cause of action or crimes. So let's clarify each of the terms. Okay.
First of all, forcible entry and unlawful detainer are remedies covered by the rule or the right of the property owner to eject users of property or those who forcibly enter their properties.
Okay.
Forcible entry as a remedy gives the right to the property owner to remove the possessor, illegal possessor, from his property, while unlawful detainer is the remedy given to the lessor or owner to remove a user whose possession is initially legal, but later on would turn out to be illegal.
Okay. Well, now it sounds so technical, no? But I guess for our viewers out there, what we're talking about are basically yung mga remedies. If you're a property owner and then either you're not using it and someone illegally possesses it, kunwari mga squatters or someone
just
claims ownership or tries occupying it pero hindi naman talaga sila, this is a way to eject them, right? But another would be if you're the one renting and nag-overstay ka na, then a remedy against you might be unlawful detainer.
Right.
Can I add to that?
Yes, of course.
Well, ejectment is really the process. It is a summary remedy that provides an expeditious means to protect your right to actual possession or the right of a possessor to possess the property.
So we're talking about possession, not ownership.
Yeah, it's possession. It's possession. But it has to be clear that it is not available to all circumstances. Diyan yung tinatawag yung sinabi ni attorney na forcible entry and unlawful detainer. Those are the facts of the case should fall under forcible entry and unlawful detainer before you could consider filing the remedy of ejectment.
But in the first place, what we're really talking about, kasi I guess for non-law students or yung mga hindi lawyers na nakikinig sa atin, it's confusing when you're saying unlawful detainer, forcible entry. Ejectment at least is more commonly known as a term. But basically, let's start with scenarios here.
Okay.
So this usually, all of these remedies and the procedure, they apply to people who own property or possess. Meaning pag possess, meron kang right as the lessor. Ikaw yung umuupa. Right?
As a lessee.
So yung ejectment, this can be a remedy even if you're not the owner of property.
Yes,
kunwari, pinahiram sa'yo ng, ikaw yung umuupa, you're renting the property, or pinagamit sa'yo ng parents mo or kamag-anak mo, and then someone possesses it, meaning tinatry din gamitin or ginamit din ng iba, pwede kang mag-file ng ejectment.
Yes, in fact, to add to your list of people who can file an ejectment case, it is also available to usurpers of property because
by usurper you mean?
Yeah, even if you don't have any legal right to it.
Terms,
even if you don't have any legal right to it, even if you're not a renter, because the law protects possession.
Meaning kung sino yung nandun talaga.
You can only be ejected by way of a lawful order, which is through ejectment cases. Because the philosophy behind the ejectment cases is to avoid a situation where you would have a breach of peace or magkakaroon ng disorder, because it will just be a vicious cycle where one party will try to dispossess the other through force.
Yeah.
or
So let's
intimidation.
talk about, unahin natin ejectment. For ejectment, you don't even have to be the owner of the property. The important thing is, you're the one possessing. Ikaw yung nandun sa property. So for instance, if I were, I started staying in a land that dun na kami nagsistay since I was born. So even if my parents already moved out, I'm still there. And then I find out later on na someone owns that property pala, they're able to present a title. They can't force me to leave.
Yes, they cannot.
cannot.
They
They
have
cannot.
to file an ejectment case.
Ejectment
So
case.
these people who will file an ejectment case, what are the requirements for them to file it?
You have to define first what kind of ejectment. No? Under the scenario that the example that you gave, for unlawful detainer, there must be prior demand. There must be prior demand.
Okay, so without that prior demand, can you
So they
have a
should
case
at least-
dismissed?
That the case would be dismissed.
Dapat
would
ba
be
in writing? They should write to
Yes,
me
that is
that
right.
I have to vacate, na sila yung totoong
That is
may-ari.
right.
So you
that
cannot
should be in
forcibly, based on the
cannot.
title that I have or based on the lease agreement that I have, I can't forcibly go there,
No, no.
bring a sheriff or
No,
bring
that will be taking the law into your own hands.
So
you
for
have to
those
make
listening, dapat pag sinabi sa kanila na umalis ka na kundi papakulong kita, it's not really
No.
the way to go about this. Una-una for
no.
you don't have to follow that type of, you don't have to believe that threat, or there's no basis also for this owner to bring the barangay captain or someone else to force me out.
You
Kailangan
need a
nila
court order.
ng
You need,
court
a, you need a
order.
court order. Okay, now just to summarize, no, basically ejectment is the action against or for two situations.
Yes.
One is an unlawful detainer where there was a legal person who had parang a legal right to be in that property
Initially.
Yes,
initially,
initially.
and then it became illegal,
Illegal.
after.
Katulad
And then-
siguro pag nag-expire yung
nag-expire
lease
contract,
that is right.
oh,
That's a
nag-breach,
good example.
nag-breach
Or kung may
ng-
contract to sell, tapos you are allowed to move in early, tapos hindi ka na nakapagbayad.
Right. So nag-breach ka ng terms of ng
Yes,
ng
ng
contract of
contract.
lease. The second one is forcible entry. Now, force lang ba yan? Meaning when someone, for example, I have possession, I have my property, someone forcibly enters. Is it only just force, or are there other means by which a person can take on the property and we can consider it as forcible entry?
There are other means.
Yeah, there are actually five.
Five, all right. Okay. So
First
hindi
would be-
lang pure force.
No,
Yes.
first would be force, intimidation, threat, strategy, or stealth.
Okay, so patagong
Yes, that's
Basically,
parang-
it's by strong arming your way in or by
deceiving.
deception.
Oo.
Deception,
By
oo.
strategy.
Right.
That's why that's stealther
Oo.
strategy.
So forcible entry is actually a case that can be filed against you. Pag ikaw yung, for instance, if you were the real property owner
Yes.
and tinatry mong bawiin, example in that scenario na nagkaroon kayo ng contract of sale pero hindi naman nabayaran yung purchase price no, para sa property. So, yung bumili sa'yo, nandun na. So, tatry mo siyang paalisin. If I force that person by bringing in my bodyguards para paalisin siya doon, ako yung pwedeng ma-file ng forcible entry.
Maybe not only forcible entry, but you could also be facing
For grave
criminal
coercion,
action, grave coercion.
yes. But
okay.
in terms of forcible entry,
Okay.
what types of, ano yung procedure doon sa ifa-file ng other person and ano yung types of penalties
Yeah.
that the
Forcible
person-
entry.
Let's say may nakapasok na. No? Let's say I have a property, may nakapasok, I notice my squatter. Ano yung first thing that I need to do?
You tell them peacefully to vacate your property.
Written.
Yes,
Written.
written.
Okay.
After that, if you live in the same barangay, you go to the barangay. If that fails, you go to court. Immediately you file an
MTC,
action or
yeah.
MTC.
You file in the MTC.
Okay.
Okay. Now, is that
so,
sige, go ahead.
for now, before we move on, because we'll have to take a break, siguro this is something we have to clarify to our viewers. One, we're talking about ejectment. So if you're either the property owner, you have to file this procedure, this remedy, in order to ask the person to leave your own property. And then again, kanina we were talking about forcible entry. This is filed against people who basically force other
Use
people to leave
force
without
or-
use force or deception, no? And then another would be unlawful detainer. In simple terms, this is when someone kunwari, ikaw yung nag-rent, tapos nag-expire na rent mo, and you refuse to give up the property, then this is the case that might be filed against you. But we'll go into those.
Marami pong details yan.
Oo, marami pang details. But siguro to clarify, kasi puro legal terms na
Yes.
nakakalito. But we'll explain that more after the break. Legal Help Desk will return after these messages. You're still watching Legal Help Desk with our guests, Attorney Jose Paulo Patajo and Attorney Gilbert Navarro. And before the break, it was starting to get confusing with all the legal terms kasi they're so highfalutin sounding. But basically, for our viewers out there, what we're talking about is if you own property and different scenarios, either hindi mo kasi nababantayan, nagkaroon na ng squatters occupying it, or you were previously renting it to someone but the lease contract has ended, but the person occupying it refuses to return the property to you, or if nagbenta ka ng property, contract of sale, and the purchaser fails to pay the purchase price, how do you remove these people from your property? And that's where we pick up from, na parang, what remedies do you really have? Or if you're the person staying there, pwede ka bang basta-basta na lang palayasin at ipapulis or takutin na lumabas. And what we're finding out is that no, you need a court order.
Yes.
So Attorney Paulo and Attorney Gilbert will explain to us
Before
the procedure.
before my compañero here discuss the specifics, no? We're talking about ejectment, which is the general remedy to remove illegal users or possessors of your property. And under the ejectment law, there are different or various remedies that Paulo will discuss now.
Okay.
Yes, as mentioned a while ago, the remedy of ejectment, that only applies for two specific instances, which is forcible entry and unlawful detainer. This may sound legal, but to try to explain it in layman's terms. When you talk about forcible entry, you talk about a scenario on how, kumbaga the difference between forcible entry and lawful detainer is how you were dispossessed of your property. So in forcible entry, it is important to note that ang important requirement dyan is the one filing should have prior physical possession over the property. So dapat nandun ka sa property mo, tapos because of yung minention ni attorney kanina, yung fists, yung force, intimidation, stealth, threats, or strategy,
You were dispossessed.
You were dispossessed.
So kumbaga, even if you're the one whose rent or lease contract already expired, bigla kang physically tinakot ka na tinutukan ka ng barel, so you were forced to leave, you're the one that can file an ejectment. And your basis is forcible entry against the owner of the property.
In fact, like I mentioned, that you don't even have to be a lessee or an owner. You can be just
The actual possessor. You're in possession of the land,
Yeah.
even if maybe illegal na yung possession mo. If someone, through force, intimidation, or stealth, takes over my possession, I can file a case for unlawful detainer.
That's
for forcible entry.
In fact, there's a case that I just recently read from the Supreme Court, decided by the Supreme Court, where the owner of the property put up a fence and then someone destroyed the fence and then built his own property there, and then the owner did the same thing. The one who was dispossessed the second time, the person who initially first broke in, was the one who filed the case for forcible entry, and he won that case.
So in other words, parang for those who might be saying that that's so unfair. I'm the owner of the property, and yet ako pa yung mapafile ng case.
Yes.
Basically, the lesson learned here is that go through the right procedure,
Yes,
meaning you
that's right.
have to go to court talaga.
Yeah, we should remember that for ejectment cases, the issue here, the only question to be resolved here by the court is actual possession.
Actual possession.
Meaning, sino ba
In
yung
other words, it's not
nandun?
ownership is
No,
not
it's not.
an element or essential element in filing the case,
It's
diba?
not,
So
it's
it's
not.
just purely possession. So you mentioned earlier that it's a summary proceeding, right?
Yes,
So maybe
yes.
you can give our viewers a definition of what a summary proceeding is, and why is it that this ejectment cases are summary proceedings?
Let me start by answering that question. by saying that the law allows a summary proceeding for ejectment cases because essentially it is a disturbance of the social order. That is why the prior possessor or the owner must be restored as swiftly as possible
Immediately as possible.
to his property. Now, why is it called summary? It is called summary because there is no reliance on technical procedure. There is no trial.
No protracted legal process.
The matter is resolved through affidavits of witnesses or by the owner. So there is no...
So mas mabilis siya.
Mabilis,
than a
so
regular case.
mabilis. Walang masyadong sa rules on evidence, wala masyado sa trial. So you submit your affidavits and then position paper and immediately the court will resolve the
And I guess to
matter.
emphasize, kasi hindi naman pinag-uusapan dito yung ownership. So,
No.
for the benefit of our viewers, you don't have to worry na unfair naman because, again, the question of ownership is not decided. It's
Yes.
only kung sino yung may right na may possession at that time, okay?
Okay. Now we have a couple of questions from our viewers. Our first question is from Twitter user @SeanReed. What are the grounds to file for an ejectment case? Ayan, we were discussing that earlier.
I
Just to
mentioned a while
summarize it,
ago. I mentioned a while ago forcible entry.
Yeah.
So yun nga, it has to be done through fists, yung force, intimidation, stealth, threats, or strategy. The other one is unlawful detainer. In unlawful detainer, the possession is in inception, sa start, it is legal. Like what you mentioned a while ago na
Tenant.
Pinarent mo or pinayagan mo talagang gamitin, pinahiram mo yung bahay
tolerance,
mo.
yeah, or through tolerance, or even for yung uso ngayon sa mga developers na you execute a contract to sell, tapos while you're paying the amortization with the developer, you're allowed to move in early. Tapos then by not paying or if you're not being able to comply with the terms and conditions of the contracts, it becomes unlawful.
Right. Okay.
And then basically unlawful detainer is for those cases where you have overwhelmed your stay. So you've not been paying your rent, you've not been paying your amortizations. That is the remedy of the owner of the property.
Okay.
All right.
We have another question from Robbie. My wife died 2 years ago. When she was still single, she applied for a housing loan for a condominium unit, but was for someone else. But it was for someone else.
Yeah.
I gave all the papers to Pag-ibig and they released the title to me. I went to the unit to talk to the person who used my wife's name. They told me that my wife gave them a deed of sale and a power of attorney so that they can transfer the title to their name. But they didn't show these documents to me. I asked them to continue paying for the loan with Pag-ibig instead, since my wife continued contributing to Pag-ibig before she died. But they didn't want to. Can I file an ejectment case so that they will leave the property? What are the procedures of filing one?
So in this case, there's a deed of sale, a private deed of sale between the deceased wife and her friends, I guess. But the title was already given to the husband, the surviving husband.
Yeah.
So, but when he asked them for the deed of sale and the power of attorney to transfer the title to them, they can show it, no? So based
But
on
it sounds
that,
like they're the ones occupying the property.
yeah, they're the ones occupying.
Yeah.
I guess the friend of the wife,
The buyer.
Yeah.
the buyer.
The
yeah.
buyer.
So in that case, but he has the title though.
Oo,
Does he
tsaka
have-
namatay na yung wife niya. What does he have to? Does he have standing to file? Meaning meron ba siyang
Given that he has the title.
right to file an ejectment case here?
I would like to assume that the title is in the name of the wife.
The wife, it's now with the husband. Binigay na
But
sa
the
kanya.
name, the title is under the name of the wife. Now the title is in the possession of the husband. Well, given that those are the facts, I think the husband has the right to eject the person now possessing the property under the unlawful detainer.
If they show a deed of sale between the wife, the deceased wife, and them,
Well, that's another
a defense.
problem.
That's a defense.
Yes, if that is the case, I will file not an unlawful detainer, but an action for revocatoria or the complete action to recover not only possession
But yung
ownership of the
oo.
property.
And I guess you can clarify dito, Attorney Gilbert.
Yes.
This is yung when you file that action.
Yes.
Again, it's a legal term, revocatoria,
Yeah,
but actually that is a different type of case that you file to settle the question of ownership. Dito, it's not just yung possession, meaning sino ba yung tamang nandun dapat, but more of even ownership.
Yes,
So,
yes.
aaralin nila yung deeds of sale,
That's
yung
right.
title.
Yeah.
And that will really settle the issue. Sino ba yung dapat na?
Now we are beyond ejectment because if that was the fact, no, we're looking at a complete action to recover not only possession but ownership.
Okay.
But my issue with the facts, because it's incomplete, is for a case for unlawful detainer to prosper, you have, as a complainant, you have to establish that the possession was legal from the beginning, but later on it had become illegal. So you have to be able to allege how it
Establish that, yeah.
and then that point in time when it had become illegal. But in this case, it appears that he had no knowledge pa nga na that someone was
But
staying there.
if talaga illegal from the start, then what can you file?
Kung illegal ba from the start, dapat yun sa forcible entry. But again, there are some periods that we have to take into consideration for it to fall under forcible entry. If it is done through yung force, intimidation, tsaka threats, you have 1 year from the point of entry. But if it's done through stealth or strategy, 1 year from discovery.
Discovery of the... No,
So right as of now, based on the facts that were given, it's really hard to give a specific remedy. But tama yung sabi
we're not
ni
sure
Atty.
when he discovered
Yes,
it.
so it's incomplete.
But in any case, I think our advice should be consult a lawyer
Yes.
para mag-guide siya no, kung ano yung tamang facts na dapat niyang tignan
Yes.
and what questions should be asked before he knows what to file. Okay, again, very interesting. We'll continue discussing this. Legal Help Desk will be back after the short break. You're still watching Legal Help Desk with our guests, Attorney Jose Paulo Patajo and Attorney Gilbert Navarro.
All right, we still have some questions from our viewers regarding ejectment and forcible entry and unlawful detainer. This time from James. No? A cousin built his house on one of my father's lots without our knowledge. They have occupied 300 square meters of a 2,000 square meter lot. We filed a case against them, but the judge told us that usually in an ejectment case, it will go as long as 5 to 7 years. Is this true? How long does an ejectment case usually last? So a cousin of theirs put up a house in their, I guess, compound yan. No?
Yeah.
7 years, 5 years?
But based on my experience, it depends on the docket of the court. But the average
Meaning kung gaano karaming naka-file na case just sa court where it is filed.
where it is filed. I have experienced some decisions that have been released after 6 months, some 2 years, but I haven't experienced something that has been decided.
But to preserve
5 to
the
7.
possession, yung di ba, ano ba yan? Are they gonna file a TRO ba? Is it an injunction? Ano yung parang, I guess, a remedy that they can avail of immediately?
Well,
para they can at least get possession right away.
For the filer. TRO and injunction is a remedy under Rule 70 of the.
So that in the meantime, before
while
the case is decided, they can get possession of the property.
Yes, by way of preliminary.
So at the very least, they get possession while the case is pending.
That's right.
All right. Okay.
Okay, another question from Sabrina. My sister filed an ejectment case against me. This complaint stemmed from when my mother gave me a portion of land in 1995 to build my house. When my mother died in 1996, my father decided to give the whole property to my sister while I was working abroad. In 1999, my father signed an affidavit intending that the property to be equally distributed to all his children. But when I went to the barangay office, I was told that my sister reported that our father gave her the property and that she is now the rightful owner of the entire property. We have a hearing next week. How can I prove that she doesn't have a right to the entire property?
Okay, medyo
Mahaba
complex
yung
to.
tanong.
It's not
Kaya
just
saka maraming
complicated.
may
years.
succession aspect pa to.
That's
Actually,
right.
an initial hearing of the question, it's more an issue of ownership.
Yeah, you're
It's
right.
not possession. So
So it's more ownership.
ownership. Kasi pati yung question niya, how do I prove that she's not entitled to the entire property?
And they're disputing yung, I guess, yung title din, yung proof na sa kanya lang ba talaga binigay to
Yes.
the sister, right? So our advice would be, what type of case should they file in court?
Assuming she wanted possession, this sister, no, now who went abroad, and assuming that she wants possession in this particular, immediate possession, what should she do, or what should she file?
Definitely, the remedy of ejectment is not available to her because it is something that really stems from ownership. There's no other way.
It wasn't through force, intimidation,
Yes,
or
yes.
threat or stuff that the other sister is occupying, di ba?
Yes,
Okay.
because she said that she was abroad.
But I understand she was able to build a house on the property during the lifetime of the mother. I think that's the case. So here, this is one of the scenario where the ownership must be resolved first ahead of the issue of possession.
right.
Possession, okay.
So our advice would be, they have to file not ejectment, but then action reivindicatoria,
That is one action that
an
they can
action
file.
to settle the ownership of the property.
So in terms of possession, the other sister can retain possession muna para status quo, di ba? The
Status
court
quo.
will respect what is the status quo.
I am interested. The caller mentioned that there is a pending case. I wonder what kind of case is pending now before the court. Because in some of the cases that I have handled before involving properties of parents, some cases were like partition, some would be interstate succession, interstate matters. So I'm interested to know.
Okay. So,
Also, the title of the property. We don't know
it's not clear, no?
if it's still under the name of the parents, or was it already subdivided, or was it transferred in
and
favor of the other
the fact that the father only issued an affidavit, is that forcible? Yung enforceable ba yun, yung affidavit that the father said it'll be distributed equally?
Well, it is controlling if you're filing a case for partition because it's evidence na the intention of the parents.
Was to equal,
But
to be divided.
as to ownership, what's controlling is ano tayo, title system tayo.
Okay,
So whatever the name is in the title, siya ang may-ari. But if it is not yet transferred, then it goes to the estate, or the heirs.
Estate plan, oo.
The affidavit, siguro, that should be used to transfer the title. I'm sorry. The affidavit is proof for the partition, but I don't think it is enough to transfer the title
from
to
one
all
sister to
or to
another,
one sister. Yes.
Like
Okay.
a will. Like a will.
It doesn't have the effect of a will. All right, our next question is from Rodney. The lessor to the apartment we're living in filed an ejectment case against us to the barangay because of late payments. But we were late for only a few days, and they immediately added a 7.5% interest. They want us to vacate the apartment in 2 months. The barangay also told us that they can't do anything about our situation because the lessor wants us to leave. Do they have a right to eject us from the apartment? Did we commit a breach of contract for simply being a few days late in paying our rent? From a legal standpoint, delayed in payment,
No.
breach?
No.
No.
No, because it's common. In the civil code, before it can be considered in default, you first have to receive a demand letter, written demand. But also, in this case, it's a matter of defense for her. I mean, you can't stop them from filing an ejectment case against them, but I'm fairly certain that the case will not prosper because the judge will see that it's not sufficient. I mean, that's where
the breach is not sufficient.
Only a few days.
Yeah.
Yeah, only
A few days.
We have legal principles like so there should be substantial breach before it could be considered breach, but 7 days is not substantial
Tsaka
breach.
in this case, yung ejectment na file pa lang sa barangay level
Sa barangay,
pa lang.
yeah.
So I guess they can settle it at the barangay level, that they don't have to vacate
Yes.
and just pay the rent. Okay, we have another question from Letty. An aunt built their house on my mother's lot. This lot was bought by my mother and she did not inherit it. I need to emphasize that my mother bought this property because my aunt is insisting that she and my mother inherited the land from my grandfather. We have documents to prove our claims. We filed a case of ejectment against them and they filed a countersuit stating that they built their house in good faith. What are our chances of winning? If we win, can they move out of their house?
Okay, so clear ba yung facts?
Oo. Basically, she's emphasizing na siya
She's
yung
purchased.
binili. Hindi talaga in-inherit.
The mother
as what
bought the property.
The mother-
Yes. The aunt is claiming na
Inherited.
in-inherit nila pareho.
But the aunt is now in possession of a portion of the
possession.
property.
And an aunt built a house.
Well, if the question is if she can file an ejectment, of course she can.
Sino? Sino dito ang file?
The owner, the
Yung
daughter.
daughter.
The daughter, okay.
Yes, because she claims that her mother is the owner of the property, and it would appear that
May title
based
siguro.
on her story, the aunt built illegally a property on a portion of the mother's lot. So she can. Now, whether that will prosper would depend on the evidence that they will present.
Also, just to qualify that, kasi the facts are also incomplete.
Right.
It depends when did they build the house, because like I mentioned a while ago, there are periods that are involved here. Now, if you built a house then for less than a year and then you filed a case within that 1-year period from the time they entered the property, then you can file a
Case for
ejectment.
Yeah.
Tsaka ang case mo, yung basis ng ejectment mo, yung
Is
forcible
forcible
entry,
entry.
meaning someone na wala namang karapatan doon sa
That's right.
lupa, bigla na lang
Biglang nagtayo.
ng
Patago.
bahay
Patago
or
or,
like ano.
Kasi when you talk about force, it doesn't mean you have there should be war or something like that. You just force yourself in.
You build the structure.
Oh, you build the structure. That's a way of forcing
Na hindi-
yourself in.
yeah.
diba? So, yun.
So in other words, kung more than 1 year na has lapsed, she
Wala na.
loses her right to file an
Yes.
ejectment case.
Yes.
So she'll have to, it will have to be na lang determination of who owns the property.
Yeah, owns, or pwede naman, if the question of ownership is not an issue, then action publishan to determine who has a better right.
Okay. All right. Now, we have a question from Evie. I manage a residential subdivision. One house and lot buyer has been delinquent in his payments, which has since been subjected for forfeiture. He does not want to offer a settlement, and he does not want to move out of the unit. It's been a year of demand letters and requests to vacate the premises to no avail. What other legal remedies can I do to settle this? So I'm assuming that he's not paying the amortization or the
Yeah.
payment for the unit, no?
This is a clear-cut example of unlawful detainer.
Unlawful detainer,
The one I
oh.
mentioned about developers. You have 1 year from your last demand to file for injection suit. So that's his remedy. But of course, if it's by amortization, you have to show that they are compliant with the Maceda law. Because there's another, you have to make sure that the contract was cancelled. Because for it to be unlawful, the possession to become unlawful, they have to establish that the legal right was terminated. So kung ganyan ka sa real estate developer, you have to follow the law as to how to cancel a contract. So that's where the Maceda law comes into play. Dapat meron yung refund of 50% ng mga binabayad.
Yeah,
Okay.
because if he keeps just demanding and pinapastay niya, then the contract is still considered
Yes.
existing. Tapos basically you just have someone in arrears of
Yes, that's right.
paying.
In
what
which case
they-
your remedy is more of a collection suit, not ejectment suit.
All right.
Okay, so for people out there, be careful, no? When you have a delinquent, either buyer na hindi na binabayaran yung purchase price, yung installments, or delinquent renter, someone who's not paying the rents properly, make sure that you really cancel the contract.
And,
So you
and,
can-
and make a demand. They make an appropriate
demands
demand.
and then cancel the contract
Right.
for the proper
And
remedies.
consult a lawyer.
And consult a lawyer.
And definitely consult a lawyer. As you can
Yeah.
see, property issues are really complicated. Kaya ang daming nagpadala ng questions, and si Attorney Gilbert and Attorney Paolo kept saying hindi masyadong complete yung facts. So in the end, you really need to hire a lawyer to find out basically what the relevant facts are, what questions to ask before you even know what case you should file. But thank you so much for your guidance.
Thank
It was
you.
very helpful at least to
Thank you for
find
having
out
us.
kung ano yung mga
Yes, Attorney
rights
Gilbert.
and remedies.
Attorney Gilbert and
property.
Attorney Paolo, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Legal Help Desk will return, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Legal Help Desk. And this evening, we had a topic about those who occupy property. So it's not even a question of ownership, no, Rod? It's really basically if you are renting property, borrowing property, and you are there, simply you cannot be asked or forced to leave without the owner going through the right process in court. So even if you're a renter who has overstayed, meaning you've tapos na yung lease contract and you've stopped paying rents. If you are the owner of that property and the lessee refuses to leave, I think moral of the story here, don't take the law into your own hands.
Yep.
You really have to go through the legal process in court and file a case for ejectment.
Yeah, so generally we were talking about dispossession of property. No? So, and there are several ways that can happen, as mentioned by Atty. Karen. Yun nga, through what they call fists, or fists. No? Force, intimidation, strategy, threats, and stealth. Yun yung, those are the 5 ways where someone can take over your property. All right, and that they call that normally forcible entry. And as mentioned by Atty. Karen, the other way is that someone is already legally staying in your property, and then later on it becomes illegal, and so you want to get rid of that person. So, yung as mentioned by Atty. Karen, hindi pwedeng you just get a bunch of goons or maybe even get the sheriff and forcibly remove them. No, there is a process called ejectment. And yun nga, and you have to file the proper cases. In the case of unlawful detainer, it's a requirement that you file submit or give a demand for them to vacate. If you don't give a demand letter, you cannot just forcibly remove them. Because if you do that, they might file a case against you for a lawful detainer. So you have
and
to
while
be fair.
this may sound unfair for all property owners out there, lalo na kung yung mga nag-occupy are squatters or someone really that has no right to that property, what the law is trying to prevent here would be violence. Meaning, if you use violence to take out other people, then it might erupt into more violence because they might fight back. So basically, you are really required to undergo this process under the law. And don't worry, it's a summary proceeding, meaning it's meant to be faster than your normal cases. But we would like to emphasize that also an important thing to remember here is that you have to do it within 1 year. So for instance, for an ejectment case wherein your basis is forcible entry, and forcible entry can be anyone. Like for instance, what we talked about, squatters who suddenly started occupying or building shanties in your property, or even for those who have relatives that started using your property, either even if they say, oh, we borrowed it, and they started putting their own house there or whatever. Within 1 year, that's when you should file an ejectment case, either for forcible entry or if you're the owner of the property. It has to be really 1 year, because or else what you have to file is an action publicana, which is, we didn't talk about that today, but that takes longer. Kasi ang sinesettle doon would be the issue of who has a better right.
Better right or ownership. No? So again, ejectment is not about ownership, it's about the right to possess. So yun yung importanteng i-mention doon. And also, if you're from the same barangay, it's a requirement that you file it first sa barangay. No? Of course, that's not jurisdictional. If the opposing party doesn't question that, then that right can be waived. No? So we can...
and lastly, again, whatever we were talking about today, yung action for ejectment, forcible entry, and lawful detainer, this talks about possession. So if you lose in that case, don't worry, because there's still another remedy, yung an action reivindicatoria. Sorry, it sounds very legal, but this is basically a different type of case where the issue to be settled is ownership.
All right, so over the week we received questions and comments from our viewers. Our first question is from Jerry. I work as a salesman. Can our manager force us to work beyond the required 8 hours? Now, salesman is by nature of his work. Hindi yan rank file, no?
Well, depende. Kasi kung salesman one yung field worker, meaning you're out in the field, hindi ka naka-station sa isang office or store, then you are not subject to the 8-hour limit na pag beyond 8 hours na may overtime, because you're basically expected to work on
Yeah.
different hours,
Different hours
random
and-
hours,
Oo,
no? Kung
minsan,
kailan ka
mag-happy hour ka pa eh.
makakabenta. Kung kailan ka
Di ba?
makakabenta. But if you are working in a store or in an office na pumapasok ka by 9 a.m. and nandun ka lang buong araw, then that is, I think, subject to the 8-hour rule. And beyond 8 hours, you cannot be forced to stay beyond 8 hours unless merong emergency cases. And if you do work beyond 8 hours, you're entitled to overtime pay. But yung key dito, check kung anong type of worker ka.
Kung field salesman ka, or let's say you're in a BPO and you're selling through calls, then
most likely,
subject ka to the 8-hour rule.
And check if your managerial position.
Yes.
Kasi supervisors, managerial positions,
Hindi rin sila covered.
hindi kayo subject dun sa 8-hour limit.
Yeah.
Okay, our next question is from Jennifer. I was hired as a distributor sales representative. The hiring agreement was that I'd be on probationary period for 6 months, but after rendering only 2 months of service, they told me that I will be released due to certain company movements. As to what these movements are, they didn't specify. What should I do about my situation? Can I file a case against them, especially since I have performed above my task standards?
Okay, removal of employees, even probationary, still requires due process. So I guess the best thing to find out is what are those company movements, no? Kasi if the movement is based on, let's say, the naluging company and all that, that's one of the justifiable reasons to remove employees, no? So I think the best way, we're not familiar with the reason why there were company movements. So I think it's best to find out, no?
In this case, ayaw sabihin sa kanya, sinabi lang, they didn't specify. So again, Attorney Rod is correct that even if you're on probationary status, during the period of probation, you have a right to due process, and you cannot be basically dismissed from that probationary status without grounds. So you can demand that the grounds be specified, and if they are not justifiable, then they breached yung agreement with you, and you have a case against them.
So make sure that you really pass their standards. Kung tingin mo lang you pass their standards, that might be a little tricky, no? So make sure that there was documentation to show that you were doing your job properly and you were passing their standards. All right. So let's move on to the comments that we've received so far, and this one is from Sandra, and I like this portion of our show. I enjoy your program very much, said Sandra. I even told my friends here in Spain that it's a very good program. Your show has helped a lot of people, so keep it up. Thank you, Sandra.
Wow, thank you,
Muchas
Sandra,
gracias.
and all the way to Spain.
Yes.
So maraming salamat. And lastly, from Jeff, your show is a big help for us non-lawyers, giving us a deeper understanding of the law. It's a great legal show. More power, and God bless. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, that's all the time that we have for tonight. We'd like to thank you, our viewers, and keep on sending your legal questions via our social media pages. I'm Atty. Nepomuceno.
And I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. If you have any questions about our topic for tonight, you may post these on our Facebook and Twitter pages. Join us again next Monday as we discuss your legal rights. Good night. Basically, occupation of
property,
house and
diba?
lots, and even apartment units.
It's quite common, no? It's I think this cause of action.
And it's relevant to both people renting or even people renting out their properties. So,
but there are 3 terms that we need to clarify: the term of ejectment, unlawful detainer, and forcible entry. Those are the 3 topics that we're discussing. Those are all not cause of action or crimes. So let's clarify each of the terms. Okay.
First of all, forcible entry and unlawful detainer are remedies covered by the rule or the right of the property owner to eject users of property or those who forcibly enter their properties.
Okay.
Forcible entry as a remedy gives the right to the property owner to remove the possessor, illegal possessor, from his property, while an unlawful detainer is the remedy given to the lessor or owner to remove a user whose possession is initially legal, but later on would turn out to be illegal.
Okay.
Well, now it sounds so technical, no? But I guess for our viewers out there, what we're talking about are basically yung mga remedies. If you're a property owner and then either you're not using it and someone illegally possesses it, kunwari mga squatters, or someone
just
claims
comes in, yeah.
ownership or tries occupying it pero hindi naman talaga sila, this is a way to eject them, right? But another would be, if you're the one renting and nag-overstay ka na, then a remedy against you might be unlawful detainer.
That's right.
Can I add to that?
Yes,
Sure.
of course.
Of course.
Well, ejectment is really the process. It is a summary remedy that provides
Good evening. You are watching Legal Help Desk. This show is about making the law work for you by giving legal advice on topics that matter to you. I'm Attorney Jimeno.
And I'm Attorney Rod Nepomuceno. Tonight we will discuss your legal rights on the subject matter of ejectment and unlawful detainer.
Our guests for tonight are Attorney Gilbert Navarro, private law practitioner, and Attorney Jose Paulo Patajo, legal officer of Cathay Land Incorporated. Good evening and thank you for being with us tonight.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Ayan.
Thank you for having us.
Attorney Paulo and Attorney Gilbert. But for brevity, Gilbert and Paulo. All right.
Okay, another very relevant topic
Yes.
since we're talking about basis. Meron kang right as the lessor, ikaw yung umuupa.
As a
Right?
lessee.
Yes.
Oo.
Yes.
So, yung ejectment, this can be a remedy even if you're not the owner of property.
Yes,
Kunwari,
that's right.
pinahiram sa'yo ng, ikaw yung umuupa, you're renting the property, or pinagamit sa'yo ng parents mo or kamag-anak mo, and then someone possesses it, meaning tinatry din gamitin or ginamit din ng iba, pwede kang mag-file ng ejectment.
Yes, in fact, to add to your list of people who can file an ejectment case, it is also available to usurpers of property because
By usurper, you mean?
yeah, even if you don't have
in
any legal
layman's
right to
terms,
it,
yung-
even if you don't have any legal right to it, even if you're not a renter, because the law protects possession. Yes.
Meaning
actual-
kung
the
sino
actual
yung
possession.
nandun
Yes.
talaga.
You can only be ejected by way of a lawful order, which is through ejectment cases. Because the philosophy behind the ejectment is an expeditious means to protect your right to actual possession or the right of a possessor to possess the property.
So we're talking about possession, not
It's-
ownership.
Yeah, it's possession. It's
Alright.
possession. But it has to be clear that it is not available to all circumstances. Diyan yung tinatawag yung sinabi ni attorney na forcible entry and unlawful detainer.
Yeah.
Those are the facts of the case should fall under forcible entry and unlawful detainer before you could consider filing the remedy of ejectment.
But in the first place, what we're really talking about, kasi I guess for non-law students or yung mga hindi lawyers na nakikinig sa atin, it's confusing when you're saying unlawful detainer, forcible entry. Ejectment at least is more
Yeah.
commonly known as a
Yes.
term. But basically, let's start with scenarios here.
Okay.
So, this usually, all of these remedies and the procedure, they apply to people who own property or possess. Meaning pag